Okay, my name is Rich Willey. I'm here interviewing David Mann, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning on November 24th of 2020. Good morning, David. How you doing, man?
Hey, Rich, good to see you. It's
Yeah,
nice to
good to meet you.
virtually. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, it's
yeah,
great.
yeah. So we've talked on the phone. I didn't know anything about you. You were referred to Wally Minko by Tom Evans as a guy who could play great saxophone tracks for us because we needed some stuff done remotely because of a snafu in our recording session. And you came through, I mean, gangbusters, man. So I absolutely love your playing. And I have used you on another session, which more will be revealed. We won't release that information just yet. But I tell you what, man, you sound so good on that. Your soprano sax playing. All right, so we're starting from scratch, man, because you got to tell us everything.
Okay, you got it, Rich.
All right.
So let's see. Where should I start? I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Um, I got I got into jazz at a very young age. I had an older brother who sadly recently he passed away in 2011, but he was a great jazz bass player, and he got me into this whole world. And him and his friends, his name is Ned Mann.
Okay.
And Ned and all of his friends would always be in the basement, spinning jazz and Blue Note records. And, they kind of brought me up as a jazz purist. So I was probably, I was a 14-year-old jazz snob. And so that's kind of where I, my introduction to this music was really at the heart of it. It was all about Charlie Parker and Coltrane and Miles and Cannonball Adderley. And
so the first musician that you got really excited about, do you remember?
It was probably, well, the very first jazz records I ever bought and I would wear out were Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and especially the group with Lee Morgan and Wayne Shorter. Those records, okay. I don't know what about them. They just, and that was even younger. I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. And I just remember like listening to Roots and Herbs on heavy rotation. And it just something, the music was so exciting. And so that really got me into it. And then as I kind of got to learn about the music, I mean, Charlie Parker was one of my idols, and then Coltrane. And obviously, like any jazz musician, you kind of spread out and you get influences from numerous different places. But those were my real hardcore first influences when I was first coming up.
Well, that explains why your playing is so deep rooted, man, because you've got so much history in your playing. I mean, I just listened to your playing and I can tell that you have done your homework.
Well, thank you. I mean, I came up as an alto player. So for me, it was Charlie Parker, Cannonball Adderley. Those were my real heroes. And somehow the music theory behind playing bebop kind of felt like it made sense to me. And when I was a teenager, I would spend the summers, I'd go to Jamie Aebersold camps. And this is so now we're talking 1979, 1980.
Okay.
And the faculty at those camps in those years was like a who's who of the Jazz Hall of Fame. It was unbelievable. I remember my first year I went, and Joe Henderson and Woody Shaw were on the faculty. Wow. And so they would give concerts at night, and it was, Dave Liebman was there, and he was a huge influence. So anyway, that was my teenage years. I started gigging around Ann Arbor and Detroit when I was 14, and just, it's been that my whole life. So yeah, I feel very, very fortunate and very blessed to have spent my life doing something that I love. And so it continues to be humbling, and continues to be challenging, and something that I think I'll never stop doing.
So. Well, so you got me, okay. I was a little bit of a late bloomer. You're, I think, 7 years younger than me. And, but I went to my first Aebersold camp in, it was the winter camp in Dallas in 1979, where they had the big ice storm.
Wow.
So all the guys who were there remember that. And that was kind of my introduction to, I mean, I didn't know anything when I got there. I was just awful. And it shook me up. And I got all this stuff from David Baker, to practice. And
Yeah.
I was
He,
inspired
he,
by.
he was an amazing educator.
Oh, I know, man. And he was so fast, and I took notes as fast as I could, and I practiced
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you were still in high school then when you went to Aversold.
Yeah, I went, I think 3 summers in my high school years. And between that and like doing gigs over the summer, it just felt like, it was just good for me to just be nonstop music at that age.
Right.
And I went to a high school where they kind of really, it was alternative education high school. And if somebody got really inspired by something, they could design some of their own coursework for that. And so it was a good time, and it served me well.
So
So,
you grew up and went through all your first 12 grades in Ann Arbor.
yep.
Okay. And then you obviously went somewhere else.
I went to New England Conservatory. I guess I got there in '81 and studied with the legendary Joe Allard,
Oh,
who
wow.
was
Yeah.
he was a legendary sax teacher, not so, not really a jazz teacher, but just saxophone and clarinet. And I kind of went there on the recommendation of Dave Liebman and others. And he was famous for having been Michael Brecker's teacher. And at that point, I was, as I still do, under the influence of Michael Brecker. He's been one of my absolute favorites.
Right. Playing under the
And
influence.
playing under the influence,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went to New England Conservatory and studied with Joe, and I played in their big band, which was called the Medium Rare Big Band, which was a very kind of eclectic and forward-looking big band. But the best thing for me, I loved going to school there, but the best thing for me was living in Boston and gigging around Boston and meeting all those amazing musicians. And it was just a really active time. And, between New England and Berkeley, the amount of musicians at that time who went on to have major careers and all kinds of music is it's pretty amazing how many people that I was in school with and doing little gigs around town with have gone on to, huge things. So.
Right. I guess I do know Claudio Roditi went to Berkeley, so he was
Yeah,
there a little before you.
he was probably there in the '70s, right? Yeah.
Something like that. Maybe, yeah. And is Jerry Bergonzi, was he up there?
Jerry was there, and I would, he between Jerry Bergonzi and George Garzone, that was sort of the,
Yeah.
those were the local heroes, and you'd go hear them at the clubs, and it felt like there was a lot of clubs to go hear music at and play at, and it was just a real kind of active time.
So yeah, I don't really know too much about the Boston area. When I did a tour with Maynard, we played at Riles, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yep, Riles was a big club there.
Yeah.
I think it's gone now.
Yeah.
When did you
best chicken wings?
When did you play with Maynard?
2001.
2001. I played with Maynard in '86.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
who was on the band when you were there?
The band was this trumpet player named Wayne Bergeron, you might have heard of him.
Heavy duty, yeah.
Trombone, Alex Isles. The other saxophone, there was 2 saxophones at that time, was me and Rick Margitza.
Okay, he's a great player.
And the rhythm section, Mike Higgins on guitar, Dave Carpenter on bass. All great players. It was sort of like his small big band, is maybe 6 horns. Alan Wise on trumpet. I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know who he is. I don't know him.
Yeah. Anyway, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was one of my first gigs out of college.
Man, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
How long did you stay on the band?
I did it for 6 months, and then he started traveling with just a quintet for a while, and so everybody kind of floated off and did other things. But
right.
And then I wish he called back a few times when they got the big band back together, but by that point I was off doing other things. But I kind of wish I had done it some more.
So where were you living in '86?
86, I graduated from college in '85, and I was still kicking around Boston. And then I moved to New York the beginning of '86, and I'd only been in New York for about a month, and then I got the Maynard gig. And so then when Maynard ended, I came back to New York and really moved here for real.
Yeah.
And started to network here and work. And And I've been here ever since. So gosh, I guess, what is that? Almost 35 years. Oh my gosh.
Is that possible?
I'm feeling old.
So tell me some of the work you've done in New York then.
Well, my career, it's just had so many twists and turns. You know, I came to New York thinking that I would be a full-time jazz musician and had aspirations to do that, but my career kind of took me off in many different ways. And I guess the big way that I never expected, and I didn't even think I was preparing for when I was in college or anything, but I got really involved in the studio scene here in New York, doing record dates, jingles, some movies. And you know, in the late 80s and early 90s, there was still a scene, and there was a handful of young players who kind of got in the tail end of the big studio scene here in New York. And I feel fortunate that I spent, it really lasted probably until, you know, 2000 or something like that. But there was a long stretch where I was, you know, gigging and playing and all that, but I was also going and doing jingles almost every day and playing on many records. And I got to work with, you know, many of my idols. And so it was an exciting time. You know, being a studio musician is, you know, every day that the phone rings, you're kind of being asked to be somebody else. Like, you know, one day they, you know, you have to be, I mean, versatility is really the key, and playing a lot of different instruments is the key. And so that was, you know, that was and continues to be a real, you know, kick in the pants about, you know, being able to do everything well. I mean, it's, if you get called to go do a session as on flute, and you're supposed to sound like a classical flutist, I mean, you got to try to do your best to sound like a classical flutist that day. And the next day, you know, you get called to play on a record date, and everybody else on the record date are like hardcore jazz players, and that's all they do all day long is play jazz. And now you're trying to fit in with them and sound just as fluid as they are. And there's a lot of whiplash that goes with it. And there's a lot of, you know, you put something on the back burner, and then you get called to do it in some high profile way. And you're like, man, I wish I had been, you know, spent the last 6 months keeping up that skill or this skill. But that's been a big part of, you know, it's a little bit of a jack of all trades kind of mentality. But
I think you might have been an ace of all trades.
Oh, well, I definitely know. You know, you do things long enough, and you kind of, you know, I'm not the world's best woodwind doubler, for example, but now at this point, I've been doing it for a really long time, and you know, some skills build up over time. But
well, see, if people ask me if you're a soprano player or a tenor player, I wouldn't know, man, because you sound so good on both of them.
Well, the funny thing is, in my heart of hearts, like, I'm an alto player, you know, pretending to be everything else. You know, when I play alto, I mean, those are the roots that go all the way back to my youth, you know.
Right.
And then soprano too, but then tenor was something I kind of picked up. I mean, when I got to New York, I had barely played any tenor at all, and you know, every horn has its own personality. You have to learn how to play that horn for the, you know, I never wanted to be a tenor player that sounded like an alto player playing tenor, you know.
Right.
But it's hard to play a bunch of different instruments and sound like yourself on all those instruments. So
yes, I definitely understand. Okay, so you play tenor, alto, soprano, and you said you play flute,
baritone.
You play bari, okay, clarinet.
Yeah, clarinet, a little bit of oboe.
Clarinet. Oboe, oh, no kidding, oboe.
Yeah,
I love oboe.
Bass clarinet.
Okay.
Yeah. And keyboards.
Alto flute or okay.
Alto flute, piccolo. Yeah.
Wow.
So
the
you
whole
know,
gamut.
I got more instruments than I know what to do with over here. So.
Well, as a brass player, Byron Stripling once told me, he said, you know what, if you try to double on brass instruments, and you know, because I play bass trumpet and trumpet, he said, you show up with a bass trumpet, people are going to say, oh, you know, he's a better trumpet player. Because, you know, some of the backstabbing tendencies in New York,
yes,
which of course is not universal, but there is some of that goes around.
Sure.
Where you show up with your trumpet and say, oh, he's a better bass trumpet player. So now I'm trying to play tuba, and I've been learning Evie. John Swana has been giving me Evie lessons.
I love the Evie solos that he played. That's John playing the Evie solos on the record, right?
It is.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that stuff. It
And
sounds great.
what a wonderful segue, man. So you got a call out of the blue to lay some solos down for us, and you get these very social justice warrior sounding tune titles like Mr. Magoo and Eeny Meeny Beanie Weenie and uh, I can't remember all the titles. Brother Kenya's Paradigm,
Yes.
based on Brother Kenya's Paradigm.
Yes, I love that.
So what must have you been thinking when you got these things?
Well, first of all, it kind of goes to show you the kind of crazy network that musicians live in. It was such a circuitous route that you found me through Tom, who I was touring with the Eagles, and then Tom knew Wally, and then anyway, so it all kind of, you found your way to me. And I got to be honest, when I first opened up the tracks, I was like, this is great, because this is in my zone. I mean, I love playing kind of funky music, but with some sophisticated changes. And I always feel like it just plays into what I love to do best. I mean, like, I kind of pride myself on being a funk contemporary musician, but also well-schooled and and being able to maneuver through harmony well. And when I open up these tracks, I was like, oh, this is kind of up my alley. So I
Well,
was excited when I first did it, and all the tracks, everything sounds great. It sounded great, and it was cool and really interesting. Clearly everybody else who was soloing before or after I would be soloing was playing their ass off. So it was inspiring. It was a really fun
well, you killed it,
sessions.
man. Uh, your solo on Secret Things, you played a soprano solo, and I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I think that's the kind of thing that if every sax player knew about that record, they would be transcribing that solo and
Ah,
figuring it out. And
well, thank you.
and the changes on the bridge, they were definitely not conventional chord movement, and you
Yeah.
made it sound like it was totally normal. You made it sound
Well,
easy. I was actually a little irritated. How does this guy make it sound so easy? And I'm sitting there struggling. I wrote the damn changes.
yeah. I mean, there's just a challenge to find common tones and to find melodies that work over complex changes, but that sound like memorable melodies. And that's what
Yeah.
I aspire to. I mean, sometimes it works a lot better than other times, and sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes, and there was a few of those solos that I played for you that were like first or second takes, and there are other solos that I sent you that were, the 14th take. But you don't need to know which is which,
No,
and
they're all by you.
I can't really remember which is which. So
Yeah. And I should have a copy of the CD in front of me so I could look at it, because I remember, I think you played 5 or 6. Oh, you do. Tell me which ones you solo on. Thank you.
Oh, God.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have my glasses on, so there's that.
Okay. Yes,
Uh,
we are getting older, aren't we?
so is it? Yeah, I'm not going to be able to fish out this without.
I know you played on Mr. Magoo,
Yeah.
played a solo on that, and I love your solo on that. And in fact, I can't even remember the changes myself, man. I can't think. I've got another tune going through my head. I can't think of that. I wonder if that's the tune where you nailed the bridge, and I'm thinking, how on earth did he do that? That might have. I think that was the one. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that was the one. Okay, all right, I'm wrong. What can I tell you? I don't even know my own material. And you did a solo on Brother Kenya's Paradigm, which I
Yep.
think is just delightful, man. You got us in touch with some of like earlier, maybe I don't want to accuse you of sounding like anybody, but like traces of Houston Person,
Oh, wow. Okay.
really gutsy, soulful Stanley Turrentine. You got us in touch with some of
Yeah.
that stuff, and
Oh,
I love those guys. Yeah,
yeah, me too. I mean, there's something about just a guy, like a player that it doesn't matter what notes they're playing, just the sound kind of just makes it inspiring. And
totally soulful.
I've always wanted to be that kind of guy. Sometimes it goes
You
better than
are,
others, but
you're there, man.
yeah, thank you.
Sure. And now you were talking about that Art Blakey, Lee Morgan with Wayne Shorter. I
Yeah.
gravitated. Do you know the sessions? Uh, I think it's Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. It's Lee Morgan and Hank Mobley, and there's a 2-record set. I think it's either Meet You at the Jazz Corner of the World or At the Jazz Corner of the World.
Yeah, I certainly had those records when I was a kid.
They do High Fly and Chicken and Dumplings
Ah,
and
so
the theme.
great.
Oh,
So
I know,
great.
man. And Lee Morgan. I mean,
Ah,
he rang my bell on that. But Hank Mobley, You know,
Yeah.
I was a huge Hank Mobley fan, and I got to play with him in Philadelphia,
No kidding.
several jam sessions and one actual gig. Yeah, man. So you talk about playing
So
with an idol.
what year would that was
That
what?
was, don't tell me, 82.
Wow.
81, 82, he was kicking around Philadelphia. In fact, the first time I met him, man, I thought he was a street person, and he
Yeah.
basically was a street person.
Wow.
There was a guy, Charlie Cunningham, who took Hank in and tried to help him, you know, rehabilitate a little. But yeah, Hank was kind of a mess. But I tell you, man, he played Old Folks one night at this place at 40th and Market in Philadelphia, and you know, you could tell he was kind of a shell of a man, you know, by looking at him. But when
Yeah.
he played, man, it's the most gorgeous. It was kind of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Bird playing Lover Man, you know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
But it was just, you know, breaks my heart to think about it. I mean, I just loved Hank Mobley. I got to give him a ride home after that gig too, and he was. I can't remember how we got into it, but we were talking about Charlie Parker, and I said, "Tell me about Charlie Parker." And he said, "Bird had the vote." And I said, "What?" He said, "Bird had the vote." I said, "What do you mean Bird had the vote?" He said, "Oh man, he had the best dope. He had the best women." He said, "Bird had the vote." I thought that was great.
I've never heard that phrase before.
I
That's
never
good.
heard it either, man, before
Yeah.
or since. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I love Hank Mobley.
It's funny.
So
I was just thinking when you were telling that story about how during that time, late 70s, early 80s, Charlie Parker and Art Blakey and those things felt like they were so far in the past, but they had really just happened, you know, like in terms of jazz history, like we were only just a few decades removed from that stuff. It's
well,
kind of funny.
Bird, I think was the exact same age as my dad. I can't
No
remember what
kidding.
year he was born. He died in 55 and he was 35, right?
Yeah, so
So
he was probably
like
born in
1920.
1920. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, he was just a little older than my mom.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that kind of put it in perspective for me. Here I am. I mean, he was the first guy I gravitated to was Charlie. In fact, you can see him on the wall behind me.
Yeah, I love your
Yeah,
posters.
yeah.
That's great.
Bird, man, I tell you, I went crazy studying Bird. And the thing to me about Charlie Parker is, you know, okay, a lot of people, they're blown away by the number of notes he plays, but to me, it's the rhythms. You know, rhythmically, I think he was absolutely, you know, light years ahead of his time. And melodically, rhythmically and melodically, I think he was,
Yeah.
and then harmonically, I mean, he had it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the magic of it in some ways is how memorable the things he like, how memorable what he played was. I mean, the fact that we're remembering it all these decades later, you know, it's not about the complexity. It's about the simple stuff that just sounds right to everybody, to, you know,
Yeah.
generation after generation of jazz musicians. And it's just, you know, if he had played any other note than what he played, it wouldn't have been as good. He just picked the absolute perfect notes. So,
And the funny thing is, my first Charlie Parker album, I bought one of the complete Savoy things. They had, you know, volume 1, volume 2, however many volumes it was. And then later I found the box set of all of them. But the one that I had gotten was, you know, with early Miles. And here I was, a trumpet player coming out of a, you know, like a classical train type of a thing. And you know, to me, a trumpet had to have this pure sound. And I'm hearing this Miles on this thing. And I'm thinking, I hated Miles. You know, here I am. And what a sacrilege. You're not allowed to say
yeah,
that if you're a jazz musician, right?
right, right.
Especially if you're a jazz trumpet player. But man, I was listening to Bird. I was digging on Bird. And, you know,
Yeah,
because
nothing
everything
like
he
him.
played sounded so correct and so logical and just so musical and so hip, man.
And worth analyzing. Like
Absolutely.
it was worthy of the study that we've all put into it. Um, and I think time has proven that, you know.
Yeah.
So
And lucky for Miles, he did get better.
yeah. Oh, I mean, for me, Miles, he's one of my, he's on my Mount Rushmore of all-time favorites.
In fact, if you look at my LPs and my CDs, I have more titles by Miles Davis than
Yeah,
anybody else. Now, if
yeah,
you look through all my records and look at the personnel, I have more Hank Mobley and Woody Shaw on those albums than anybody else.
no kidding.
And I used to
Yeah.
have more Charlie Parker than anything else, but a whole bunch of those got destroyed in a car accident.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know, man. It's terrible. What do you do? Anyway, so this has got to be about you now. Yeah. My wife tells me that I end up interviewing myself, and we can't do
That's that's okay.
that.
It's all good.
So tell me what you're doing to keep yourself from going crazy during 2020 here.
Okay, so like everybody, we're all dealing with the pandemic. I, for the last many decades, even I've always recorded from home. I've always produced. I've always worked on people's records from home and composed and had home studio. And so when the pandemic hit, it just felt like, okay, I'm just going to be in my home studio now and hope the phone rings. And thankfully, I've been pretty busy working on
Excellent.
people's albums. I produced. I guess the biggest thing I've done this year was I co-wrote and produced the title track of the new Dave Koz album called A New Day, and that was really fun to work with him. He's always been one of my I've known Dave for a long time. This is the first time I worked with him in this capacity. And his record is, currently #1 on Billboard, as you would expect, a major artist like that. So that was a big thing for me. I do a lot of work in that genre, smooth jazz, mostly producing. Right now I'm producing another sax player named Steve Cole, and we're finishing up his record, and worked on my friend Andy Snitzer's album. So there's been a lot of record work this year. There's been a lot of kind of like what I did for you, like people will pop up and I'm doing a record and can you play in a couple tunes? So it's been a fair bit of that. And, like most of us, I think I think I've done 2 gigs since March,
Yeah.
outside the house, some random, like, let's play outside kind of gig.
Right.
And it doesn't look like there's going to be much happening until, I don't know, spring, summer of next year. So we're all
Right.
kind of hunkering down.
Yeah.
Try to make it through one more winter of this crap, and then maybe we'll get out and start doing some of the stuff we love to do outside of the house.
I'm glad to hear. So glad to hear you're definitely staying focused and recording and stuff like that. I had a shoulder surgery in May. The last gig I played was March 19th. So and part of it was I wasn't supposed to play for holding the damn trumpet or bass trumpet, and so I have written a whole ton of more tunes. So I'm going to be calling you again.
Oh, good. That's
I wrote
good.
like over 50 new tunes.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
and I think a couple of them are actually good. And in fact, you're playing on one of them. That was
Oh,
yeah,
excellent. I
yeah.
love that
You're
tune you
already
sent.
you're already on that one.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, we're gonna try to release that here within the next couple months.
Fantastic.
So yeah. Anyway, but no, I think staying busy, staying focused, staying positive, and are now you keeping tabs on all your doubles?
Yeah, I keeping up on the doubles and practicing the flute and clarinet, somewhat with some regularity, and then sometimes I'll get called to record on those instruments, and then that'll get me cracking the whip.
Is there any instrument that you can play more than the others that keeps the other ones in better shape?
Well, there is kind of some funny relationships. Like if I practice a lot of clarinet, then playing the alto sax feels like just right. Like it somehow just focuses you.
Yeah.
All the reed instruments kind of wreak havoc on the flute. If you play, it's a little hard to keep the flute up if you're like really playing hard on sax or clarinet, so there's a bit of a juggling act with all of that. But, the double that I play the best and that I've been playing for the longest is the flute. So that one, doesn't seem to.
Now I haven't heard you play flute, man.
Yeah.
You got the juices flowing.
Yeah,
here.
I really love to play flute. I mean, it's.
Who are some of your flute heroes?
Well, I mean, Hubert Laws is kind of
yeah.
my hero in a way. And
understandably.
One of my heroes when I was a teenager is still, he didn't have a huge output of solo records, but Jerry Nywood was one of my heroes when I was a kid, and he just had a great way on the flute,
and soprano,
and soprano, and obviously saxophones, and but flute and alto flute. He made some really beautiful records in the 70s. So he was always kind of one of my inspirations on the flute. But
anybody else?
it's, a jazz flute, there's great jazz musicians who play a little bit of flute, and then there's great flutists who play a little bit of jazz.
I understand.
Um,
Yeah, Hubert
so
Laws, he's definitely amazing.
he
Is
totally
he still
is.
playing? What's he doing?
He is still playing. Yeah, I don't know much about what he's doing. I mean, the gentleman that repairs my flutes also repairs Hubert's flutes, so sometimes I hear about him, through my repairman. But
Yeah.
I think he's still playing, and so
I it had to be 78 or 79 or something. I was watching the Newport Jazz Festival on TV, and I remember Diz was on it, John Faddis, George Benson. It was like a jam, and Hubert Laws. So Diz plays a trumpet solo, and he sounded good. He was getting older, right? And then John Faddis plays right after him. John Faddis just, woo.
right.
I felt a little
Yeah.
bad for Diz, and then so then Diz scats a solo, and then George Benson does a guitar and singing solo, and I'm thinking, oh, Diz, man, what? But then the next thing you know, Hubert Laws plays a piccolo solo and destroyed everybody, man.
Oh man,
He summed it all up, man. He is a bad dude. That guy.
he totally is. There's just a few of those, like they seem like freaks of nature, And Eddie Daniels is kind of like that on the clarinet.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like, how do you even get that good? I don't. It seems like, I don't know how there are enough hours in the day to become that proficient on these instruments, but
It's so
you know,
polished.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, how about I was hoping you were going to say James Moody on flute.
Yeah, I mean, I love some of his solos on those old records, but I haven't really done much of a deep dive into his flute playing. But now that
Yeah.
you've mentioned that, I'll go back and
Oh man,
revisit some of that stuff.
He was a fantastic flautist.
Yeah.
Flutist, I guess is what you're supposed to say.
Yeah, I guess.
And I similarly, I forget what year it was, like 99 maybe, in Tampa, they did the International Jazz Hall of Fame, and it was huge. Steve Allen was the MC, and he totally winged it. He had no script or anything, and they were giving awards to all these people, and there was seriously a who's who of jazz stars there. Ray Brown. I mean, I can't even tell you all the cats, but everybody was there basically. But and everybody played some, and the whole night, the guy who played, to me, he just smoked everybody, was James Moody, and he did a tenor solo, and it was the most amazing. It's like the entire history of jazz in one solo. It was
Wow.
all there, man. So yeah, James Moody was unbelievably great. And I've only heard a couple other musicians who really have done that to me, like in one solo. Ellis Marsalis was heavy. Did you ever hear him play?
I didn't hear him play much. No,
he did
I'll
a
have to
concert
go back and
he did a concert in Asheville several years ago, and I'm telling you, man, you heard the whole history of jazz in you listen to a couple of his solos, and it was all there, man. Every bit of it, up to McCoy, or back to James P. Johnson or whatever, man.
Wow.
It was all there.
That's amazing.
Father Hines, I know, man. So it's 2020. So I don't know, man. Tell me something about yourself that you wish an interviewer had ever asked you, but nobody ever asked you, so you never got to tell anybody.
Oh gosh,
but you're actually kind of proud of it, and you think it's kind of cool, and nobody knows because nobody's ever asked you.
Well, that's funny. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of doing interviews in general, and this has been totally pleasant, and I appreciate it. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about what I wish they would ask me, because I guess in my heart of hearts, I wish nobody would ask me much of anything. So I guess, one thing that I don't have an exact count, but at one point I tried to add up all the CDs that I played on, all the recordings I played on in my life. And this is about 10 years ago or so. And it was over 500 commercially released CDs. And since then I've probably played on 200 or 300 more. So I guess it's at the end of the day, when my career is kind of, when I'm, looking at my career in the rearview mirror, to think that I played on over, at that point, maybe I will have played on over 1,000 commercially released CDs. That feels like maybe that was an accomplishment.
That's pretty huge, man.
It's kind of hard to know, it's what is a career, and at some point, like, you have to just be a musician in this day and age, and whatever, support a family, raise a family, and play good music. And so I feel very fortunate and very blessed to be able to do that for all these years.
That's huge.
And for the most part, I've gotten to play some really great and inspiring music. And, I feel like every day I wake up and feel like, let me get better at some part of this huge patchwork of skills that I've tried to maintain. And it keeps you going. So I guess that's how I look forward, is like, let's just keep getting better at this stuff. And, it's keeps you waking up in the morning and being excited about what you do.
Well, you have a lot of material that somebody with like marketing background could really do something with, because I know I tried to find out information on you when I was just looking for a picture of you, and I couldn't find much of anything, man. So
yeah, I keep a fairly low profile. I don't know.
I'll say
It's not a good thing necessarily, but I feel like musicians, a lot of musicians know who I am, and
Yeah.
that's who my clientele is working for other musicians.
Yeah.
And I'm just never been much good at self-promotion.
Most musicians aren't, myself
And
included.
yeah, it's just really not my bag. But it's been a struggle to me to figure out how to function in this social media world. It just doesn't feel like me, and to be, always touting accomplishments and things and that like that. But
You're not on social media, are you?
I'm on Facebook, yeah,
Okay.
but that's it.
Okay.
And whatever websites or anything I had are now long since gone. And eventually, I do have a goal of getting back to making my own CDs again, but it's been a long time, and part of me wants to, if I'm going to make any kind of social media splash, for whatever that is, or get more involved in social media, I'm going to do that when I have something of my own to present to the world. And because years go by and I don't get around to it, that's partly why the whole social media thing seems so mysterious in that department. So anyway.
I was on Facebook briefly. I couldn't handle it. It's just too much for me, and I got
Yeah.
other things to do. Yeah. So so you're telling me you do have other CDs that you have done under your own name?
I have there. It's going back many years, and it was all kind of in the smooth jazz genre. Did a couple in the 80s.
Tell us the names and the labels.
I did 2 records for a label called Antilles Records.
Oh yeah.
What
were the names of the records?
Called Games, and the second one was called Insight.
So David Mann, Games,
yeah,
and Insight on
and then
Antilles
I made a record in 2000 and maybe 2000 on a label called Encoded Music, called Touch. And then I guess the most recent thing that kind of came out under my name, but it was also when my brother Ned was he had been struggling with ALS for many years.
Wow. Yeah.
And so he was at the very end of his life. What he really wanted to do was to make a CD with all of his old friends in the music business, and everybody, it was just an outpouring of people. And so we made a CD called Finding My Way Home, which had Mike Stern was on it, Randy Brecker was on it,
wow.
Mark Egan was on it, Adam Nussbaum played on
Wow.
it, Tim Ries.
Oh yeah.
These people that had been Ned's friends over the years.
He was a
all
bass
pitched
player,
in.
you said, right?
Yeah, he was a bass player. He couldn't play anymore at that point, but everybody else pitched in and played. And we made a double CD. And so we did that in 2011. That was a huge personal kind of moment for everybody.
Beautiful thing.
So yeah, so that record is called Finding My Way Home.
Okay. And you told us the label?
That is, well, that was something that Ned put out on his own label. So Ned Mann, Finding My Way Home. So if
Okay.
anybody's interested in that, that's still around. So
Okay. All right. And now, obviously, you have been writing some tunes then.
yeah, I've always been a somewhat prolific composer. And I have hundreds and hundreds of songs that have been recorded on
Wow.
on a lot, mostly smooth jazz records, and I've had some radio hits and whatnot for a variety of artists.
Man, you're like a gold mine waiting to be discovered, man. Some marketing guy needs to get a hold of this.
Well, I don't know about that, but
I do.
I've just it's composing is I've always just kind of composed, and it sounds like you are the same kind of way, but just I love to compose, and even sometimes it goes in spurts. Sometimes I'll write a bunch in a little stretch and then nothing for 6 months or something. But I have a huge backlog of songs, and I have some songs that are very personal to me that I eventually will get around to recording. And then I have some songs that other artists recorded that I want to do my own versions of. So I have a record worth of stuff all written. I just have to buckle down and and get to it. So
the kind of stuff you do, is it sort of like, rhythm section and lead instrument, or do you have stuff that you've arranged, intricate arrangements for multiple instruments?
I've done some of that. I've certainly, I've written big band arrangements, I've written string arrangements, I've written a little bit of, full orchestral things for people, but mostly, most of the composing that I do is for, just sort of jazz, contemporary jazz, smooth jazz. I haven't written a few vocal tunes over the years with the collaborators, but that's really not my bag, and I love to compose, and it's I for myself, I kind of feel like if I write 20 songs, there'll be one or two gems in there, and then so composing is kind of like a muscle. You have to keep it flexed and keep it strengthening, and sometimes I just force myself, I'm going to write a bunch and then just see what I come up with. And oftentimes some of it gets tossed in the bin, and then you come up with a couple good ones. So
Do you remember the BMI Jazz Composers Workshops?
I do, yeah. I was never involved in that, but I think, well, I think it was still going before this, but yeah.
Because I went the second year they did it, which I think was, well, might have been 79 or 80 or something. And Bob Brookmeyer, I tell you what, that guy, well, he was a genius, obviously, but he had all kinds of tips. He said, try this. He said, try writing a bad tune. Because I told him after the first couple of weeks and hearing him, talking, and it's like it shook me up so bad I couldn't write. I came in, I said, Bob, man, I can't write anymore. He said, that's great. he said, you're uncomfortable. and he said,
awesome.
try writing a bad tune. So yeah, just the act of sitting yourself down and writing something. Now, do you discipline yourself to sit down and write frequently? How do you do that?
It really goes in spurts, like, and it's really nothing about anything that I do is very systematic.
Sure does work, man.
I find that
that's your system, is to not be systematic.
Yeah, well, if I sit down and say I'm going to write today, it probably won't be successful. But if you just allow yourself in between doing things, let me just fiddle around with that thing. Oftentimes writing, I'll find one or two little chords that kind of fit together nicely, and then that'll sort of kick around my brain for a few weeks, and then.
So you write at the piano?
Yeah, I write at the piano, and just try to write with sounds that inspire me. I mean, I have, these days I have a whole world of sounds at my fingertips, as most of us do in our computers. And, certain sounds will inspire me to write certain kinds of music. And so it's it beats working for a living. I'll put it that way.
Well, whoever started calling performance on a musical instrument playing,
yeah,
come on, man, it is work. You and I know that.
Yes.
So you were talking about Michael Brecker, and I only recently discovered, with my interest in the EV, the electronic valve instrument, that he was a genius on the EWI, the electronic
Yes, he was.
woodwind instrument. Have you ever messed with it?
I have an Iwi that I never really got along with that well. I tried it for a while. I practiced. Yeah, I practiced it for a while. I never really got the.
You didn't get along with it. That's funny.
Well, I never really gelled with it. It takes practice like any other instrument.
Yeah.
And I never really kind of busted out and like brought it to a gig. At one point I was supposed to do this little tour. I was going to play Evie, and then at the last minute it kind of, so I was shedding it and shedding. I was going to go on do this little gig with it, but then it didn't happen. And so it's that's on my list of projects.
I would urge you, to start messing with like 5 minutes a day, man.
Yeah,
because that'll add up.
Yeah, in
fact, pull it up and try to get a bad Iwi solo. Go ahead though. Sorry.
Yeah, I love some of that stuff that Brecker did on the Iwi. It was just cool, heavy and inspiring, and some of that stuff where he would play lines and then there'd be all these interharmonies kind of in there, like these random tone rows of notes would be triggered along with his top note, and incredible.
Yeah,
really incredible.
I know, man. And in fact, Niall Steiner, who invented the Evie, and I guess the Iwi came out after that. Apparently, he and you know what? I don't have my story straight. It was another Evie guy that they started hanging out. Him and Michael started hanging out, but he started putting a hair scrunchie around the mouthpiece because if you play it for a long time, the moisture, the condensation.
Yeah.
We don't call it spit, right? But it would start to get into the mouthpiece, and it would cause the instrument to do strange things. So they call it the Michael Brecker scrunchie.
Nice.
Everybody who puts a scrunchie on their Evie or their Iwi, they call it the Michael Brecker scrunchie. Yeah, I think that's kind of funny. Yeah, but he was amazing. Now, are you familiar with the Horace Silver hard bop grand pop album?
Not that one in particular. I mean, I remember when I think of Horace Silver and Michael Brecker, I think of Pursuit of the 27th Man.
Isn't that a great album?
That was great.
So great, yeah.
And I think there was probably a handful of others that he played on with Horace, right?
Well, for this one, he got Ronnie Cuber on Barry, Steve Turre on trombone, Claudio Roditi on trumpet, and Michael Brecker on tenor. And it's a great album. It's a great album. And soon after that was made, I was in New York. I had already moved down here, and I was hanging out with Claudio, and I asked him something about it, and he said, he was upset with Horace because he said Horace in front of everybody said to, and these guys are all gone now, so they can't defend themselves, and I probably shouldn't say it anyway. But he said Horace told Michael, he said, Michael, I want you to leave all that weird psychedelic stuff for your albums. He said, I want you to play the changes for me, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Put some parameters on Michael Brecker of all things. Here's how I want you to play. It's like, come on, don't you hire him because he's Michael Brecker?
Well, I think of all people, Michael had played on so many records and been so many different things to different people.
Yeah.
In fact, I have one of my obsessions is I have this on Spotify. There's a playlist that somebody compiled of every sideman record that Michael Brecker ever played on, and it's thousands and thousands of, I don't know if it's thousands, but it's many tracks. And you just click on these random records that you've never heard before, and there's some record that he's like, they clearly asked him to sound like Clarence Clemens or something, and he still kind of sounds like Michael, but he sounds like Clarence Clemens, and
so he was happy to oblige,
I guess. And then there's another record, and then there's like some real bizarre jazz records, and he's like just the outest version, so like everything in between, he did it on record dates. And did it at the highest possible level. So I mean, to me, that's incredibly inspiring that he's, to have played on that many different records and that many different styles.
So you didn't mind it too much then when I asked you to think about a couple things when you were soloing?
No, of course not. Okay. I'm used to all of that, so it's all good.
By the way, we chose the one that's melodic.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was happy with that solo.
No, I am too. I'm looking forward to getting that thing out there. Well, David, this has been fantastic. I feel like I know you a little better.
Yes.
I was in New York back in January for the Jazz Congress, and you were doing something else. You were playing with Debbie Boone, you told me.
Yeah, I was playing. I was at one of the APAP conference, I guess it was.
Okay.
You know, it was one of those gigs, and now when I look back on it, and we didn't realize that it was all going to come to a screeching halt. But
yeah, I was hoping to get to meet you then, and we didn't. So
yeah,
oh well.
Next time.
Yeah, probably not this January, but maybe the following January.
Excellent.
Yeah, because that Jazz Congress, it was pretty interesting. I learned a lot. You know, I definitely have the weakest marketing chops of, you know, any musician who tries to run a business that I know. So trying to get a little better. And I really appreciate you doing this, man.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'll be putting this up on my website. I did one with John Swana the other night and put it on YouTube, and it's also on my website, boptism.com. But yeah, I mean, we need to get you some business too. More people need to know who you are. You know,
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna
let's
keep doing what I'm doing, but I am gonna branch out and get involved in all that.
And you are a father. You have twins. You told me 14.
Yes,
twins.
14-year-old boy-girl twins, and they're doing pretty good. And we're all, you know, a little tired of being cooped up, but we're making the best of it all.
Okay.
So,
but you're still living in the city proper?
Living in the city, and we love living in the city. It's been a really tough stretch for the city, and you know, but this is home. And I mean, what makes the city great is just all the people here. Right. So, you know, that's what makes it home. But you know, it's been tough because you put up with a lot of crap living in the city, and but you know, the benefit is that, you know, there's all this amazing stuff to do, and shows and music and this and that and restaurants, and it seems like all of it is kind of gone away, and all you're just dealing with is just the inconvenience of the city. So it's been a tough stretch.
I was living there when 9/11 happened, and I remember everybody said, "Oh man, you know, this is going to change things forever," and it wasn't too long before everything was back to normal.
Yeah, I think New York is going to have a big comeback, but
yeah, I think we're going to look in the rearview mirror like you were talking about, and we're going to say, "Whoa, you know, it wasn't as bad as we thought." You know, I know a lot of people have died, but hey, man, you know, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah,
I still think we're going to look back, and we're going to learn a lot from it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely changing things for sure.
Yeah, I don't think people will have died for no reason whatsoever. I think there'll be some kind of benefit in it all.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I have no way of knowing, but I think it's going to be all right, man. So yeah, I hope some people, I doubt a lot of people are going to flock to my site to watch the David Mann video.
Okay.
But well, if they do, I hope they do, and they start sending you some more work, man. You family man, supporting kids and stuff. Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Some work. All right.
And if anybody has any comments or questions, and you know, send them my way. So.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to put when I put the Swana YouTube up, it said comments are not allowed, and I'm thinking we need comments, so I got to figure out how to do that.
Okay.
On YouTube, I don't know how to do it, but we'll get that going so people can say how great they think you are.
Okay, good.
Which they need to hear you, man.
I appreciate it, man.
All right, David, man, you're awesome. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Rich.
All right, I'm going to end it now.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Behave yourself. All right. Bye.
All right.